Hi guys, it's Katie from Blueprint Games here. In this tutorial I'm going to be covering how to make a crystal inside Unreal Engine 4. So we're going to be covering how to model, texture, unwrap and assemble the material inside the engine. Also we're going to be covering a little bit about parent materials and material instances, as this is going to allow you to make lots of different colours for your crystal and change them in real time. So let's get started. So let's take a look at the material first in Unreal before we start modelling. This is what we're going to aim for by the end of the tutorial. So this is actually a blueprint. It allows me to change the material to different instances. It does some other stuff for our game as well. But you can see I've got a drop down list here where I can make the material blue, red, green. This selects a random colour out of all of them. And the different colours are based off a parent material, so I use a material instance to change aspects of the material to suit how I want it to look, so it's all about your personal preference. Here's an example of the material instance. So you should be able to control the colour of the crystal by the end of the tutorial. Here's an example. So we've got colour dark, so this is just the overall colour of the crystal. So we could go for a more purple colour, like so. And then we can have a lighter colour. So this is the colour that pans across the crystals. And you can sort of just get a little bit creative with that if you want a more pinkish colour. It's completely up to you. The only reason this isn't changing here, so the shine and the general glow, is from a particle effect, which I won't be covering in this tutorial. But this is just part of the blueprint, and it automatically will change the particle effect to suit the right colour material. So that's only the reason why it looks a little bit off there. But you can see how the material for the crystal changes. For the glow underneath, this is going to be a spotlight that's actually added underneath. This is just the best effect I could find. If you have any advice on how I could make that better, it'd be great to hear it. But this is just, it doesn't cast any shadows, a spotlight put underneath to sort of give it that nice glow. I've tried Emissive, but it hasn't really given me the effect I want, although I've included it in this tutorial in case you really like the effect that it gives you. So let's just go back to the material instance. So the other options we have is roughness. Now this doesn't really do much of an effect, but I've put it in there anyway in case you want to play around with it a bit. Refraction, I've taken this from the real life value of crystals, which is 2.42. But you can also adjust this. It really depends on what you want for your game or your visual effects that you want. The panning speed of the... Oh yeah, you can see it there. Just the panning speed for the reflection that goes across. The opacity, so you can mess with that as well. And an emissive that you can add to it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start modelling our crystals in our 3D modelling program. Okay, so let's make some quick crystals. I'm just going to start off with a cylinder. Go to my top view by pressing T, and I'm going to turn on my snaps toggle and just drag out a quick cylinder. I'm going to press P to go into perspective mode and just take a look at that. And I'm going to take the sides down a bit. It's a bit down to personal preference. I think I'll go with seven sides. Okay. Take a look at the front viewport by pressing F. Turn off my snaps toggle. And I'm just going to use the scale tool to just bring this out slightly. I'm going to bevel this. Like so. And I'm going to bring in the bottom a bit more, scale that in. There's more you can do. You can sort of twist and rotate the shapes a bit as well on the vertices there. This is all down to personal preference on what you think looks good. If I take a look at my current crystals, I've used about 3 different shapes for the crystals on this version. So you can make lots of different crystals. Actually, I've got it quite thick at the base there. It really depends what you're looking for here. Because we could turn this into like a crystal pickup almost. Like a crystal shard. But if you want to go for the cluster of crystals, then you might want to have it thinner at the top. Okay. It's good to have reference images of real life crystals as well, just to sort of give you some inspiration. You see that in some of them I've sort of welded the tops while some of them I haven't. I can grab the polygon at the top and twist this slightly as well and bring that down. Let's just take a look at that. I think I preferred it the way it was before. Okay, so I'm just going to connect these vertices here, just to make sure there are no n-gons. Actually, let's get the cut tool and just make sure that this is using polygons. And I can delete the polygon at the bottom here, unless you decide that you want to have see the bottom. In the version that I have, you can't see the bottom of the crystal, so it's really up to you on what sort of game you're making. Now let's take a look without the edge faces. Now I have smoothing groups here that are creating this smoothed effect, and I don't want that for the crystal, since the crystals obviously have hard edges. So I'm just going to change my smoothing groups down here under polygon smoothing groups. When I select a polygon, I just change the smoothing group. This is because if you have 2 polygons next to each other that have the same smoothing group, it's going to create that smoothing effect. And this is really important for later, especially when we bring it into Substance Painter. Okay, so this is our crystal shape. Now we're just going to unwrap that. So I'm going to add a unwrap UVW modifier on top, like so. And let's get a checker pattern on there. So just scroll down, select checker pattern, and it'll put it on your model. Now let's see if we can quickly unwrap this by just going to mapping and flatten mapping. Okay. Now select the side of the UV here and just do stitch custom, and we're going to just put these together, bring them all together like so, and just get all the pieces. Where's this one go? Okay, and I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to turn on select by element and just grab that, and I'm just going to relax that out a bit. Oh, select relax by polygon angles. And I'm just going to stitch that on, deselect the select by element, and stitch this piece on as well. And then just check to make sure that you've got nice even squares around your UV map. And we're just going to plop that in. There's a lot of wasted space here, but if you look at the original version that I have here, because these are several different crystals that are in the UV map, so what you can do is try to fill up spaces like this. Don't waste any UV space. So if you're going to make more crystals later on, make sure that you use up the space here so that you're not wasting space. Let's collapse that down and export this out. And we're going to call this SM crystal. Okay, so that's the modeling part done. Fairly simple. When you, what I've done for Unreal is originally I did scale this all down to make it more like a cluster, like here. But because there are some issues with Unreal, I'll show you what I mean right now. 1 second. You can get some pretty odd effects if you bring in the cluster all together. You can see here that it has issues with transparency, so models are sort of overlapping one another. So what I had to do is bring the crystals in and keep them as separate static meshes to get the right result. I do believe there's something you can do now to stop this. I think it's something to do with forward shading. I've looked into it a little bit, but I haven't had any good results yet with it, so I've just kept it with the separate meshes. As you can see, they're all in there by themselves. Ooh. So all of these are their own separate meshes that I've brought in, like so. So you can start to make your cluster inside 3ds Max, but what I just did was make them separately and then put them inside Unreal like that. Okay, so let's get into Substance Painter. Okay guys, let's talk about masks. So we're going to be making our mask inside Substance Painter 2. If you don't have Substance Painter 2, that's totally fine. You can do this all by hand in Photoshop. The reason why I use Substance Painter 2 is it just makes things a bit easier, since it just sort of does all the work for you. But you can just do this manually with some sort of texture brush and just paint in all this detail. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by just bringing our mesh and baking in the textures. So just come down to Bake Textures and press here, and I usually do an output size of about 2K, and I just bake that all out. Okay, and then I work in base color, so I'm just doing this in grayscale. We're not going to do it in color, since we're going to do all the color inside Unreal Engine, inside the actual material. So that will allow us to create all the different colors in the material instances. So what you want to do is just right click and display next channel until you get base color. We're not going to be working in material, since we want to focus just purely on how the grayscale looks. So just display until you get base color. So I've already done this just to sort of test out a final look so that I don't waste your time with just sort of trying to find something I think looks good. So let's just go through what I've done here. So I start off with a very sort of neutral mid-range grey sort of a colour, not too dark, not too light, and this is just my base for my crystal. And this is just a fill layer. I don't worry about metal roughness, normal or height, not important. And then I add another fill layer on top, so this is a lighter grey colour that sort of gradients down to the base, since I want it to be darker near the base of my crystal. This is just a personal preference of mine. If you'd prefer it to be darker at the top, you can. You can just change the colour by selecting this and just playing with it until you find something that you like. And the way I use a smite mask is I just go down to smart masks and I apply it to my fill layer. So what I did is I'll just show you quickly how to do this. I add a fill layer, I get a slightly different color, and then I just drop and drag this on top. And we'll just change this slightly to be lighter. There we go. Then the next step is I add an even lighter color. And this is just to add a lot of texture variation there. It's almost like a marbling effect. So I've chosen a much lighter color now, and I have put a surface worn on top. The next important step is the edges. So if you look at the edges in the material that we have inside the editor, you'll see that the edges are lighter around the sides. So this is all done using just the base color. You can see that there's these sort of blotchy, darker blue areas as well, and I just think it gives it a nice sort of effect. So this is what we're doing right now. And so this is once again just another very light light color. I think it's this one, yep. You can't really see it here, there you go. It's just sort of a pure white color with a edges strong or edges uber just dragged on top. And you can play around with the mask itself by clicking here and going to mask editor. And you can sort of play with the global balance or the global blur to sort of get the result that you really like. I then also added a color dodge and just brought this down a bit so it wasn't so strong. And it sort of overlaid a bit with the other textures that I have done. And then finally, I like to have a very strong contrast from the bottom to the top, so I just added another grey to sort of like a gradient up, and I just manually painted this one in. So actually no, this is a ground dirt, so I just did a darker grey now on top of all of this, and ground dirt smart mask. Where is that? There we go. So just drop and drag that on top, and then I just changed some of the values under ground dirt, so I just played around with the level and the contrast and the dirt height. I then added a blur on top because it's quite a strong effect. If you just take that off, you can see how it's quite patchy, and maybe you don't want that, so I just right click, add a filter, and then select blur from that filter, and then just bump that up. Okay, so now we're going to export this out, so just go to File, Export Textures, and export this as an Unreal Engine 4 packed, or just anything that allows you to get the base color out of this, or the albedo or diffuse map, since we aren't worried about the normal or the roughness or anything like that, because we'll be doing that all in Unreal Engine. And then I'm going to export this as a 2K document. So let's go inside the editor now. Let me just close Substance Painter, since we won't be needing this again. And let's go and bring in our crystal mesh. So I've imported the crystal mesh in, as you can see, and dragged that out. And we're going to start off by creating our actual parent material. So right click and press material, and call this m_parent. Or maybe something a little bit more specific if you've got a lot of different things, maybe m_parent crystal. And now we want to bring in that mask that we've just made, so make sure you import that in. And then we're going to drag this into the parent material. Now we need to change a few settings first under the details tab, so just come down to surface and blend mode to opaque to translucent. And scroll down and also change the lighting mode to translucency volume. Now we're going to need to make a lerp, so just right click, type in lerp, and select this. And then make 2 3-vector nodes, so just hold 3 and click twice to make these 2 3 vectors. And then plug these into A and B. And this into our alpha. And then this into our base color. Now convert these to parameters, so this is going to allow us to make our material instances and change the color of our crystal in real time. And name them color 1, color 2. And I'm just going to apply that, and then we're going to see how this looks in the actual engine, just so I can demonstrate to you how the mask works. Okay, so let's make our first material instance. So just come up to your parent material, right click, create material instance, and apply this to your mesh. Okay, so we've applied our material instance, just double click, open up your instance, and you can see these 2 colors that we've made into parameters available to us. So just click to turn these on, and then we're going to play with the colors. And you can see that we're able to create all these different colors and sort of shades and texture variations just using this mask and these two selections here. It just sort of gives us that freedom to sort of make all these different colors. So the base of our color material is looking quite good. So let's go back to our parent material and keep working on that. I'm just going to select all these and press C to make a comment, just to keep everything neat. And then call this my base color. And I'm going to drag this out the way. Now we're going to add the refraction, so this is quite important. Just press 1 and click to make a new node, and we're going to make this 2.42. I believe this is the refraction for crystals in real life, but you can sort of just convert this to a parameter so you can play around with it and see what you like. For the normal, I'm just going to press 3 and make another 3 vector and plug that in, and then I'm just going to add 1 to the blue. And then for metallic and roughness, I just keep this at 0. You can make this parameter or do 2 separate ones and play around until you get a result you want. That's totally fine. Okay, so let's work on the opacity. Okay, so with the opacity, we just want to make a quick gradient texture inside Photoshop. I will include one inside the description of this video so that you don't have to bother making one yourself if you don't want to. Okay, so I'm just going to grab my gradient or import that in. And drag that out. And then I'm just going to multiply this. So drag out from here, type in multiply. Then press and hold 1 and click and plug that into your B. And then just plug this into opacity. Now there are different ways we could do this. You could use a linear interpolate again in a similar way to just separately control these different parts. Completely up to you. We'll convert this to a parameter just to play around with that as well, so we can have different opacities. And then select all this, press C, and call this opacity. Oh, I've commented it again. Whoops. Okay, opacity. So let's take a look at that inside the editor. Okay, so now that this is loaded in, we can see that the opacity is still set to 0, so let's just bring this up a bit. And you can sort of see this subtle fade from the gradient. Gives us sort of a full control there. I think the gradient's got a bit of a strong contrast there still, so you could smooth that out to make the transition slightly better. And then we could also change it, so if it was a linear interpolate like before, if we were to change that inside our parent material, that means we could control these separately. So we could go into Photoshop and sort of smooth this out to get a better transition here, since it's quite a sudden and harsh transition. So I'm just going to do that now. Okay, so I've just paused the video to change that transitional gradient to be slightly softer so that we can get a nicer effect. So you can see it's as much, it's improved so that it's not so harsh, the sudden change in opacity. Like so. So this is looking a bit washed out, so we're going to add an emissive now. So all you need to do is take your lerp, take it down here, type in multiply, add another 1 node by holding 1 and clicking. We can convert this to a parameter, so this is going to be our emissive strength. And plug that into the emissive. And I usually use about a default of 3 on this. Okay, let me just drag this all out and make sure it's neat. I'm just going to comment this. Okay. This could probably be neater. And let's take a look and see how that has improved our material. Okay, so we can see how the emissive has made this look a lot less washed out. And you can sort of play with the emissive strength directly in your material instance to get the result that you'd like. Okay, so we're going to be working on the material that pans across our texture that makes it look like it's shining. right click and type in world position, and then you're going to want to divide this. Then we're going to need another 3 vectors, so just hold 3 and click, and we're going to change this to 1K. So this is going to be the resolution of the texture we're about to use that's going to pan across our crystal. So the texture is something I've already made inside Photoshop. I'm going to include it in the description of the video. Here it is. This is what it looks like. This is what's panning across. And this is at a resolution of 1K, so that is why I've set this to 1K. Okay, so we're going to drag this out. Type in ABS. We're going to multiply this. Change this to a minus. And then we're going to plug this into our divide. Then we're going to mask this out. And I'm going to change the mask to R and B. Then I'm going to put this into a panner. Type in panner. And then we're going to add another 1 node. So just hold 1, click, plug this into our speeds. This is how fast it's going to pan across our material, and convert this to a parameter. And I'm just going to call this my pan speed. And then I'm going to plug this into the texture that I've made. Now we're going to want to use another lerp. So let's just comment this first. Press C. And we're just going to call this our panning texture. Okay, so make another lerp. Plug this into our alpha. Then we're going to plug the base texture into A. Make another 3 vector and plug this into our B, and this is going to be the lighter color that's going to pan across. So we're going to convert this to a parameter and make this our shimmer color. Come up with amazing names for my parameters. And then plug this into our base. And then apply. And there you go, you can see that we've got this shining effect across our crystals. Let's just change the shimmer colors to something a little bit more obvious. Oh, I've just noticed I've put the lerp in the wrong way. That's why it's doing that weird effect where it's darker. Just come into the parent and let's switch these around. So we want this to be in the A color, the A node, and then the base we want to be in the B. And apply. Okay, so you can see now that we have our finalized material with a pan that goes across it, and you can see how it uses all of the crystals here so that it pans across. That's because of the world position that we've used. And finally, I have some examples here of multiple instances I've put together to just demonstrate to you all the different colors and things you can now do with this parent material. So thanks for watching the video, guys. If you have any questions, please leave them below. I want to also apologize for this bad tutorial. I notice in some places I might waffle on and make mistakes, and I know it's no excuse, but it's been extremely hot here. We've got no air conditioning inside the office at the moment, and it's been really difficult to try and concentrate throughout the entire tutorial. I've had to take loads of breaks, so unfortunately the tutorial was kind of made in bits, and it was a bit awkward to record. So I'm going to leave all the project files in the description. Please leave me a comment and tell me what you thought, if there's anything I could improve with this format, and what sort of tutorials you'd like to see in the future. So thanks for watching, guys, and see you in the next tutorial.